The steel door slammed shut behind him with a sound that echoed down the concrete hallway, clang. The air inside ADX Florence was cold and still. Inmates here didn't just serve time, they disappeared. No one saw their faces. No one heard their voices. Inside their small gray cells, time froze. Officer Daniels stood in front of cell 212, staring through the tiny slot. Inside sat Marcus Hale, a man once known as the Shadow in the underworld. He hadn't left his cell in 8 years. 8 years without sunlight. 8 years without another human touch. The only sound was the faint buzz of the lights above and the slow, steady breathing of a man who seemed to have become part of the walls. Daniels slid the meal tray through the slot. "Breakfast," he said flatly. No response. Marcus's eyes didn't move. They stared straight ahead, cold, distant, and hollow. Something about that stare made Daniels uneasy. That morning, rumors had already spread among the guards that Marcus had been whispering to someone in the night. But in ADX Florence, there was no one to whisper to. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared down the corridor. Daniels jumped, his heart pounding. "Unit 4 lockdown," a voice yelled over the intercom. Red lights flashed and the metallic hum of cell doors locking echoed like thunder. Daniels froze, looking back at Marcus's cell. Marcus was still staring forward, but this time there was a faint, chilling smile on his face. And then, everything went dark. Years earlier, before Marcus Hale became the ghost of ADX Florence, he had been one of the most feared men in Chicago. Known for his cold precision and silence, Marcus ran an underground ring that smuggled stolen weapons across state lines. No one ever saw his face, that's why they called him the Shadow. But one night everything changed. His crew was ambushed during a deal by the FBI. Marcus was the only one who escaped. 4 months, he hid in abandoned buildings, living off scraps, watching his empire crumble on the news. He knew they'd catch him, he just didn't know when. That when came one cold morning in Denver. The agents tracked him to a motel just off the highway. They kicked the door in, guns drawn. Marcus didn't run this time. He just stood there, calm, holding his coffee. "Took you long enough," he said before they cuffed him. He was sentenced to life without parole for multiple crimes, including trafficking, armed robbery, and conspiracy. But because of how dangerous and manipulative he was known to be, the court sent him to the most secure prison in America, ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Inside, everything changed. Prisoners here spent 23 hours a day in their cells. No contact. No freedom. The walls were thick enough to drown out screams. Cameras watched every corner. Even their showers were inside their cells. The idea was to make escape, and rebellion, impossible. At first, Marcus followed the rules. He didn't speak, didn't fight. He read books, did push-ups, and stared out at the cement wall that blocked the sun. But then, something strange started happening. Guards began to find words scratched into the walls near his cell, messages no one claimed to have written. Late at night, they swore they heard murmurs, faint whispers, echoing through the vents. Some said Marcus had found a way to talk to the prisoners next to him. Others said he was talking to something else. Officer Daniels didn't believe in ghost stories. Not until that day. The day the power went out. The day Marcus smiled. Because when the lights came back on, something was written on the wall inside Marcus's cell in big, dark letters. "They never leave." And beneath it, a single bloody handprint. Daniels staggered backward, frozen in fear. The other guards rushed down the hallway, shouting orders. But Marcus Hale, he was gone. The cell door was still locked. And there was nowhere to go. The sirens screamed through the concrete walls as guards stormed down the corridor. Flashlights cut through the darkness, scanning each cell, each corner, each shadow. But Marcus Hale, the man who hadn't left his cell in 8 years, had vanished. Check every door. Every vent. Every camera feed. Officer Daniels shouted, though his voice trembled. Sweat rolled down his face as he stared at the still-locked door of cell 212. The slot was closed, the bolts unbroken. There was no hole, no opening, nothing disturbed, just that single haunting handprint and the words "they never leave." The warden arrived minutes later, a tall, serious man named Robert Klein. His jaw was tight as he stared into the cell. "No one disappears in ADX Florence," he said coldly. "No one." But the cameras told a different story. When they rewound the feed, Marcus was sitting on his bed one moment, and the next, the screen flickered with static. For 6 full minutes, nothing. When the image returned, the cell was empty. Daniel's hand shook. "That's impossible," he whispered. "The feed never cuts like that. Not here." The warden didn't reply. He just turned to Daniels and said, "Lock down every block. We find him before morning." That night, as search teams swept the prison, Daniels couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's strange behavior over the past month. How he'd been murmuring to himself in the dark. How guards heard tapping sounds, soft, rhythmic, like Morse code, echoing through the vents. Some even claimed to have heard a second voice answering back. One guard, Officer Reed, had joked, "Maybe he's making friends with the ghosts." Daniels didn't laugh then, and he sure wasn't laughing now. Hours passed with no trace. Every cell was checked. Every corridor scanned. Still nothing. ADX Florence had been built to be escape-proof, steel doors, motion sensors, and guards watching from towers 24/7. Even if Marcus had vanished into the air, the walls didn't lie. By dawn, everyone was exhausted. Daniels was sitting in the control room, staring at the monitors when something flickered again. For just 1 second, he thought he saw movement inside Marcus's cell. He leaned closer. The figure on the screen was faint, like static taking shape. A human shape. Daniels froze. "Warden, you better see this," he said, his voice breaking. But before Klein could step forward, the figure looked up, directly at the camera, and smiled. It was Marcus Hale. Daniels gasped and grabbed the radio. "Unit 4, report. We've got visual in 212. But when they opened the cell door moments later, Marcus wasn't there. Only one thing had changed. Another message was scratched into the concrete wall below the first one. "Some of us never left." The warden ordered everyone out of the block. He stood silently, staring at the message, then muttered, "Seal this section off." Daniels didn't understand. "Sir, what do you mean seal it off? He could still be in there." The warden turned slowly toward him. "You don't get it, do you, Daniels? This isn't the first time." Daniels blinked. "What are you talking about?" The warden hesitated, his voice low. "Every 10 years an inmate from this block disappears. No trace. No escape. Just gone." Daniels felt his stomach twist. "And you just cover it up?" The warden looked away. "Some things are better left buried." The words chilled Daniels to the bone. But that night, as he drove home, he couldn't stop hearing that static-filled whisper in his head, the one he heard from the cell monitors before they went dark again. It was Marcus's voice. "Soft. Come. Too close." "Officer Daniels," it said. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Daniels slammed on the brakes, gasping for breath. The radio in his car suddenly crackled, the same sound from the prison feeds. And through the noise came one final whisper, slow, steady, and chilling. "You're next." The next morning, Officer Daniels didn't show up for work. When the warden called his home, there was no answer. His patrol car was found abandoned just a few miles from the prison, engine still running, radio still crackling with static. By noon, search teams spread across the area, combing through the snowy fields that surrounded ADX Florence. The air was heavy and silent, even the wind seemed afraid to move. One of the officers found Daniel's flashlight lying in the snow, still on. But there were no footprints. Not one. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Inside the prison, the power flickered again. The same static that appeared before Marcus's disappearance returned to the monitors. Only this time it was different. Every screen in the control room showed the same image. Marcus Hale sitting in his cell, staring straight ahead. But that couldn't be. The cell had been empty for over 24 hours. Warden Klein leaned closer to the monitors. "This is impossible," he whispered. But as the image sharpened, his face drained of color. Because sitting beside Marcus, clear as day, was Officer Daniels. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the camera. Klein stumbled back. "Shut it down. Cut the feed," he barked. But the switches didn't work. The screen stayed frozen, the two figures unmoving. Then, slowly, Marcus turned his head toward the camera, and his lips curled into that same eerie smile. "Welcome home," he mouthed. The lights in the control room exploded with a loud pop. Sparks flew. The room plunged into darkness. Panic spread. Guards shouted orders, but the radios only spat static. Somewhere down the hall, a cell door creaked open on its own. The warden grabbed a flashlight and moved cautiously toward cell 212. The air grew colder with each step, and the light flickered with every breath he took. When he reached the cell, the door was wide open, something that was supposed to be impossible. He shined the light inside. The walls were covered with writing now, the same words over and over again, scrawled in what looked like dried blood. "They never leave. They never leave. They never leave." And in the center of the room sat two figures. Marcus Hale and Officer Daniels. Both sitting perfectly still, facing the corner. Neither moved, neither blinked. Their skin was pale, almost gray, like statues carved from stone. Klein's flashlight flickered out completely. A faint whisper rose from the darkness, low, steady, and cold. "You open the door too." The warden stumbled backward, heart pounding. He turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind him with a metallic echo that shook the entire block. The other guards rushed toward the noise, but when they pried the door open minutes later, the cell was empty again. No warden. No Marcus. No Daniels. Just the writing. And on the wall, fresh words appeared beneath the rest, still dripping as if they'd just been written. "Now we're all inside." Days later, the federal investigation began. The prison was sealed, the files classified. The government called it an electrical malfunction and reassigned the entire staff. But among those who had worked there, the whispers never stopped. Some said they still heard Daniel's voice over the prison radios at night. Others swore they saw movement on the old security feeds, flickering shadows pacing inside cell 212. ADX Florence remained open, but that cell was never used again. It was locked, welded shut, and marked as restricted. To this day the guards call it the cell that breathes. Because sometimes when the lights go out, they swear they hear the sound of someone whispering through the vents. They never leave.